Picture this. Suspended in this black void are three objects, three medical instruments designed by the German military to cure the exact same disease. The first is a dried hazelwood switch from the Prussian Army, 1756. It represents the era when trauma was diagnosed as cowardice and the cure was a flayed back. The second is the Kaufmann Electrode, 1916, a jagged electrical probe connected to a hand-cranked generator. It represents the industrial cure, torturing the human nervous system to override a broken mind. And the third is a Brave Mind VR headset and an MDMA capsule, dated 2026. It represents the modern era, where we stop punishing the body and start hacking the memory code itself. Three objects, three eras of psychological warfare. But before we can examine the industrial electrical torture of the Great War, we must first look at the crude flesh-tearing discipline of the 18th century. Because to understand how Germany tried to fix the broken mind, you must first understand how they punished the body. If you enjoy learning about the hidden truths of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing. And please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I find it incredible that we're exploring these dark forensic files together, connected across time and space. Act 1. The Era of Flesh. The year is 1756, the Kingdom of Prussia. The concept of PTSD does not exist. The biology of a surging amygdala is not recognized by military science. If a soldier freezes in battle, if he shakes, if he panics, it is classified as cowardice. They called it Feigheit, cowardice. King Frederick the Great operated on a very simple psychological thesis. A soldier must fear his officer more than he fears the enemy. The treatment for panic was the Spießrutenlaufen, running the gauntlet. This wasn't just physical pain, it was a ritual of social execution. 200 of your own comrades form a tunnel. You are stripped to the waist. You must walk through it. If your brothers do not strike you hard enough, the officers will beat them next. To survive, they must tear the flesh from your back. By the end of the line, the muscle is exposed. Brine is poured into the wounds to prevent sepsis. The brain learns instantly. Panic equals agony. The fear of the enemy is overridden by the terror of your own commanders. But what about depression? In the 18th century, homesickness was called Heimweh. It was considered a lethal fever. Soldiers literally died of grief, their hearts giving out. The Prussian psychiatric cure was immediate, primal threat. Doctors would dig a grave and threaten to bury the depressed soldier alive. Or they would heat oil to a boil and threaten to pour it over his chest. The sheer shock forced the brain to abandon its sadness and prioritize survival. The whip and the threat of the grave worked for the musket era, but the whip is useless against 1 million high-explosive artillery shells. The primitive definition of cowardice was about to collide with the mechanical slaughter of the 20th century. The era of the whipping post was over. The era of the electrode had arrived.
Act 2. The Era of Industry. 1914. The Great War. The battlefield changed forever. It was no longer a test of human courage. It was a test of biology against industrial chemistry. A German soldier in the trenches of Verdun was subjected to millions of concussive vibrations. This was not psychological fear. This was physics. When a 150mm artillery shell detonates nearby, the atmospheric pressure changes violently. The blast wave passes directly through the skull. It physically liquefies microscopic blood vessels in the brain. The constant rhythmic pounding of the barrage literally rewired the human autonomic nervous system. It created a permanent short circuit in the brain's survival mechanism. The German Medical Corps called it granite neurosis, shell shock. The symptoms were terrifying. Soldiers arrived at the field hospitals, shaking violently. Some were frozen in rigid, unnatural poses. Some were completely mute, their vocal cords paralyzed by trauma. They were known as the Kriegszitterers, the war tremblers. But the German High Command did not see a medical tragedy. They saw a crisis of labor. Germany was fighting a war of attrition. Every man was a unit of production. A shaking man cannot hold a Mauser rifle. A mute man cannot shout orders. The doctors refused to diagnose them with physical trauma. Instead, they diagnosed them with male hysteria. They believed these men were subconscious saboteurs, weaklings acting sick to escape the meat grinder. The goal of the military hospital was not to heal them. The goal was to force them back to work. Enter Dr. Fritz Kaufmann. He pioneered a treatment protocol with a very specific sadistic logic. The hospital must be made more painful than the trench. If the cure is worse than the disease, the soldier will simply choose to be healthy. He called it the surprise attack. The procedure was clinical torture. The patient was strapped tightly to a wooden table. High-voltage electrodes connected to a hand-cranked generator were attached to the bare skin. If the soldier was mute, the electrode was pressed violently into his larynx. If his legs were paralyzed, it was attached to his scrotum. The current was cranked to 2,000 volts. The pain was absolute. It was designed to completely overload the nervous system. As the electricity burned through the flesh, Kaufmann would shout military orders at the screaming patient. Say A, stand up, walk. The shocks would continue for minutes, sometimes hours, until the soldier obeyed. And it worked. The mute spoke, the paralyzed walked, the tremblers stopped shaking. Kaufmann proudly reported a 96% cure rate. Not because they were healed, but because the human brain will do anything, absolutely anything, to stop the electricity. These cured men were immediately put on a train and sent back to the Somme. Fast forward 20 years, the Third Reich. The Nazi regime inherited the Kaufmann method, but they added a new, far darker layer: eugenics. Under the swastika, a soldier who broke down mentally wasn't just a coward. He was biologically polluted. He was life unworthy of life. During World War II, the treatment of PTSD shifted from torture to total elimination. If the electric shock therapy failed, the soldier was no longer discharged to his family. He was quietly transferred to the T4 euthanasia program. Hospitals like Hadamar were converted into killing centers. The diagnosis of shell shock was erased and replaced with schizophrenia or feeble-mindedness. Thousands of Great War veterans, men who had shaken uncontrollably for 20 years, men who had won the Iron Cross, were rounded up. They were told they were going to a special sanatorium for a final, painless cure. And they were right. The cure was carbon monoxide. The German state murdered its own traumatized heroes because they were broken machines that consumed rations but produced no victory. They were labeled useless eaters. The ultimate cure for PTSD was execution. By 1945, the mechanical era had failed. The electric cure was recognized as a war crime. But as the 21st century dawned, the military didn't stop trying to hack the human brain. They just changed the tools. They traded the electrode for the pixel.
Act 3. The Era of Silicon. The year is 2026. The Bundeswehr Hospital in Berlin. The whip is gone. The Kaufmann Electrode is gone.
Modern military psychiatry no longer punishes the soldier for breaking down. Instead, it views the traumatized brain as a biological hard drive that has been corrupted by bad data. And to fix it, you don't beat the hard drive, you rewrite the code. This is VRET, Virtual Reality Exposure Therapy. In the past, traditional talk therapy failed because the traumatized brain built a firewall. The soldier repressed the memory. He couldn't access the file. So today, the military forces him back inside. The soldier puts on the headset. He is not playing a simulation. He is re-entering his exact nightmare. The simulation is constructed using forensic GPS and video data from his own helmet camera. But the biohack is not just visual. The soldier wears a haptic feedback vest that vibrates to perfectly mimic the blast wave of an IED. Scent generators in the room release the precise chemical odor of burning diesel and cordite. He is physically back in the kill zone. His heart rate spikes. The amygdala, the fear center, surges. But this time, a clinical therapist is speaking into his ear, guiding him, forcing the brain to process the sensory data without the physical threat of death. It is a controlled digital rewiring of the nervous system. But sometimes the trauma is too deep for virtual reality. The firewall is too strong. That is when the military turns to chemistry. In 2026, the psychological frontier is psychedelic-assisted therapy, specifically the clinical use of MDMA, ecstasy. Under the influence of pharmaceutical MDMA, the amygdala is chemically temporarily shut down. The soldier can look directly at his most horrific memory, the exact moment his squad was wiped out, and feel absolutely nothing. No panic, no shame, just raw data. He can file the memory away. He can debug the error. It works. Soldiers who haven't slept in a decade are cured in 3 sessions. But this brings us to the dark, forensic reality of the Silicon Age. The military is not investing millions in these therapies to help veterans find inner peace. They are doing it to recycle them. A cured soldier is a redeployable asset. We patch the software, wipe the cache, and send the weapon back to the front line. We are building the eternal soldier, a man who can experience infinite trauma, return to the clinic, have his memory chemically edited, and go back to war. We have finally solved the problem of the broken machine, but we may have erased the human being inside it. Part 4. The Verdict. Look at the forensic timeline of the German mind. In 1756, they said, "You are cowardly, we will beat you." In 1916, they said, "You are broken, we will shock you." In 2026, they say, "You are buggy, we will update you." We have stopped using pain as a cure. We have replaced the whip with the algorithm. But the goal of the military has never changed: to silence that screaming biological part of the brain that says, "This is wrong. I don't want to die." Now, I have a survival question for you. If your mind was shattered by the horrors of war, would you prefer the honest brutality of the past, where you were allowed to be broken, even if society punished you for it? Or would you choose the artificial peace of the future, where they edit your memories until you are ready to kill again? Let me know your verdict in the comments below. And if you think the German military only tried to biohack the brain, wait until you see what they fed their soldiers to eliminate sleep entirely. For the forensic history of Pervitum and the Nazi war on fatigue, click right here. I'll see you in the lab.